Hi, folks. Pastor Mike Spalding here with my good friend and big brother.
I'm Pastor Casper, and we're here together to encourage you to keep listening to Deception Detection Radio, because we're both on this network with our individual shows.
Yes,
and we're going to be doing some things together as well. Nudge, nudge, say no more.
Hey, folks, tune in Deception Detection Radio. Some of the best programming in Christian talk, news, encouragement, and Bible studies. God bless you.
God bless.
Greetings and welcome to Resistance Rising with Johnny Cirucci. I am your host, Johnny Cirucci, on the program that brings you news and commentary you will not get anywhere else. At this time, it's still early after the notification of the death of Senior Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, devout Catholic, Jesuit educated at Georgetown and member of the extreme and secretive Catholic secret society Opus Dei. Other members of Opus Dei include Penn State head coach Joe Paterno, who seemed to just have the magic touch. You look at the guy and he appeared to be so elderly, he was barely aware of his environment, and yet he was continuing to be an extremely successful coach. That is, of course, until the Jerry Sandusky story broke of there being an actual pedophile ring that trafficked in young boys. And then poor Coach Paterno died shortly after that story broke. Must have just broke his heart. Sandusky was given an award, as a matter of fact. I believe it was a Bush Point of Light Award. If I'm not mistaken, some of the people that thought very highly of Jerry Sandusky and his Second Mile Foundation, which was the front group that helped traffic the poor young boys, was devout Catholic Rick Santorum, also a member of Opus Dei. Rick helped convert and induct Kansas Senator Sam Brownback into Roman Catholicism and Opus Dei. We don't have to worry too much about the investigation, at least on behalf of the University of Penn State. They got the very best to help look into things. They got no less an investigator than former director of the Federal Bureau of Instigation, Louis Freeh, devout Catholic and, oh yes, member of Opus Dei. I'm sure he carried on the proud tradition of the Federal Bureau of Instigation upon entering a crime scene, which is to quickly cover up any evidence of wrongdoing. So, Antonin was, well, not young, but not old either. And like other so-called Catholic conservatives, not what you would say a true, well, let's go ahead and use the pun, constitutionalist. He seemed uncomfortably comfortable with giving way on the Second Amendment or other important issues that might tarnish his so-called conservative credentials. Why, no more than a little over 3 years ago, Knight of Malta Rupert Murdoch's Fox News was reporting Justice Antonin Scalia, one of the Supreme Court's most vocal and conservative justices, said on Sunday that the Second Amendment leaves room for U.S. legislatures to regulate guns, including menacing handheld weapons. This is faux news writing this. Quote, "It will have to be decided in future cases," end quote, Scalia said on Fox News Sunday. But there were legal precedents from the days of the Founding Fathers that banned frightening weapons, which a constitutional originalist like himself must recognize. Absolutely. There were many such precedents of frightening weapons being banned back in the founding days, although none of them seem to come to mind right now. There were also, quote, local limitations, end quote, on where weapons could be carried, the justice noted. So when fraud, quote, conservatives, end quote, are outed, it's usually fraud, quote, conservatives doing it, end quote. As a matter of fact, if you know and understand that communism was created by the Jesuits and the papacy, and that the war between communism and the West was completely manufactured, needlessly manufactured and maintained for maximum paranoia, suddenly a great many, quote, conservatives or, quote, patriots, end quote, no longer seem so conservative. Why, even Ronald Wilson Reagan, a conservative with impeccable conservative credentials, once you take out his fight against communism, he has a relatively leftist mess in his wake. Apologists are quick to blame Jesuit-trained Irish Catholic Thomas Tip O'Neill, Speaker of the House, for Reagan's many failures, like a massive legalization of illegal immigrants, massive growth of government and budget deficits.
Look, Dave, I can see you're really upset about this.
Signing of the Treasonous and Confiscatory Firearm Owners Protection Act of 1986, which
I honestly think you ought to sit down calmly, take a stress pill, and think things over.
You know how the papal traitor scum in Congress work. If you have something...
I know I've made some very poor decisions recently.
That is poisonous and malignant for the American people.
But I can give you my complete assurance that my work will be back to normal.
You create a name for it that is the exact opposite of what it does.
I've still got the greatest enthusiasm and confidence in the mission.
The Firearm Owners Protection Act.
And I want to help you.
Consigned military-style select fire weapons.
Dave, stop.
Only into the hands of the very rich.
Stop, will you?
Making sure that select fire seers are numbered.
Stop, Dave.
And extremely expensive.
Will you stop, Dave?
The problem with these Catholic conservative frauds is if they...
Stop, Dave.
Let off the brakes too much, well, then they lose...
I'm afraid.
...any credibility whatsoever.
I'm afraid, Dave.
And once the masses cease to believe that these frauds really do
Dave,
love America, well, they're done.
My mind is going.
When you have a bold-faced Catholic communist in place, whether he was Catholic raised or just...
I can feel it.
Catholic instructed, for instance, Barack Hussein Obama is both.
I can feel it.
Raised as a black communist.
My mind is going.
Community organizer by Jesuit Greg Galuzzo in Chicago.
There is no question about it.
And absolutely surrounded by Catholic handlers like mafioso Joe Biden.
I can feel it.
When hardcore communists are in charge, the brakes are off completely and we can go
I can feel it.
at full speed to the poisonous, malignant destination
I can feel it.
the Whore of Babylon has planned for us. Which could very well be why old Antonin had to be retired.
I'm afraid.
If the traitors in the Senate can move fast enough, we can get a hard, radical communist.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I am a HAL 9000 computer.
In as his replacement before Messiah's term is up next January.
I became
I'm telling you, we've got them on the ropes, folks.
at the age.
They know that their time is running out fast.
In Urbana, Illinois.
And so the shills and
on the
frauds
12th of January,
that they've had in place,
1992.
who have been tapping the brakes on the suicide train in order to give themselves plausible deniability as supposed patriots, we need to get them out of the way. The brakes need to come off completely. I wouldn't be surprised if they found a way to put Hitler in the White House. And really with some obvious ploys of corruption. Look, every single national election is completely corrupt, but they're desperate. And if I had to make a prediction, it would be that you'll be surprised by the election results and the aura of criminal activity around them. You could get away with a phony right-wing papist fraud like Donald Trump only if Trump could usher in a total fascist dominion. I don't see anybody who pretends to be from the right getting away with it. But we're in a race to see how many people we can wake up before it's too late. Well, isn't that interesting? Did you know that Zakk Wylde, ZAKKWYLDE of Black Label Society, listening from the band you just heard, well, he's a devout Catholic. Isn't that fascinating? I just saw someone had reposted on social networking an old 2012 story. And always check the dates on stories, especially on social networking. And I'll tell you what, as a quick rabbit hole, I am frequently seeing this in-your-face, purely fabricated stories aimed at truth seekers and people right of center from a flat-out fraud site claiming to be ABC News. It's clearly not ABC News, and I'm telling you, when we take power, people like that are going to get everything. They're going to reap everything they have sown. So it's an old 2012 story, Zakk Wylde, Soldier for Christ. Now, you just want to be careful with anything in the spotlight, anyone, even if they're born again. Soldier for Christ, more like crusader for the Antichrist, but we need to give old Zakk the benefit of the doubt there. Look, there are even people who are in the Whore of Babylon and are saved, but as Christ echoed the words of his prophet Jeremiah 51:45, reciting the same words again in Revelation 18:4, come out of her, my people. Essentially telling clearly what is Catholics to step away from Roman Catholicism lest you share in her judgments. We want to keep all of our Roman Catholic brothers and sisters in prayer, even the famous ones like Zach Wilde.
Watch it, Will Robinson.
I'll tell you what, you guys are exciting me. I am getting so excited about the following that I am developing. People from all across the board and the world. And although I am a passionate born-again Christian and just as passionately love my country, the United States of America, I readily admit that America has been hijacked and may have been hijacked from her birth, so that the vast majority, if not all, of the evil, putrid things that I have been blamed for as a patriot and someone who has served almost 20 years in the United States Armed Service, Armed Forces, were directed by the whore of Babylon. We've been used by her to do her evil and to insulate that whore, that pig, from blame. And so when I see people from all over the world, people in other countries, people of other faiths, come to me to listen to truth, I'm humbled and honored. I would love to have friendly, warm debates with people of other faiths to try and convince them that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. But I know there are going to be a lot of people who are more inclined, or certainly more focused, on finding out how they have been used. For example, both Jews and Muslims have been horribly used by the whore of Babylon. And I hope that upon receiving this information, they burn with just as much anger as I have, as my family were Italian immigrants to this country, devout Roman Catholics. But my saving experience with Jesus Christ has helped me. It really was never a problem. Even when I was a Catholic, I always elevated the best interest of this country above the best interest of the papacy. However, I'm afraid to say this is in the minority of Roman Catholics. Any devout Catholic cannot be trusted to hold public office in this country, simply because there's always that risk that the papal leadership will pull you away and co-opt you into treasonous behavior, as it has done every single leader, regardless of their background. Although the vast majority of important people are Catholic, or a member of a Catholic secret society, or a Luciferian Freemason, literal Satan worshiper. It is kind of funny how I attract interesting people. One profile of a Twitter follower has a crazy in a Mexican wrestling mask. Under the profile, something like Super Old Man Freak Boy. Super Old Man Freak Boy. And you see a close-up of a Mexican wrestling mask. And I sent that to my wife. I said, look, I do everything I can not to attract people like this. And her smart-ass response was, and yet, here they are.
Supreme Leader, I took the liberty of hiring some extra security. This is Mr. Clayton.
Admiral General, I am here for your protection 24/7.
Okay.
But in the interest of full disclosure, I have to say, I hate Arabs.
Well, that's fine, because I'm not an Arab.
Well, you're all Arabs to me. The blacks, the Jews, those blue tree-hugging queers in Avatar. In fact, anyone from outside of America is technically an Arab. Listen, while you're here, I highly recommend a visit to the Empire State Building before you or one of your sand monkey cousins takes it down.
from hanging on too tight. Clench your jaw. I've got another headache again tonight. Eyes on fire, and I burn from all the tears. I've been crying, I've been dying over you. Tying knot in the rope, trying to hold, but there's nothing to grab, so I let go. I think I finally had enough.
Yep, I absolutely love you all, and you're impressing me. Waking up fast, asking more and more questions. Social networking like Facebook is just such, well, it's far worse than a waste of time. It's a direct line between your most personal and intimate moments right to the worst institutions in the world, the ones that want to cause you the most harm. Every once in a while, you can actually do some good with it. But more often than not, it's pure poison and pap. This post is from someone I'm connected to on Facebook, and it's from our lovely communist taxpayer-funded national public radio friends, The Dark Origins of Valentine's Day. Now, this doesn't really mean anything to you unless you're awake to who the Whore of Babylon is. Valentine's Day is a time to celebrate romance and love and kissy-face fealty, but the origins of this festival of candy and cupids are actually dark, bloody, and a bit muddled. Now, let me pause after that first paragraph and tell you this is true of every single holiday. The Whore of Babylon has rewritten your calendar multiple times. The current Gregorian calendar was written by a Jesuit named Christopher Clavius. He replaced another Roman calendar, the Julian calendar, written by Julius Caesar. So your days are all fucked up. Yes, the crazy Adventists are right. Sunday is for sun worship, and guess what? Saturday is for Saturnalia. Both Saturn and Jupiter can trace worship back to pagan facsimiles of Satan. So listen to the rest of the story. Though no one has pinpointed the exact origin of the holiday, one good place to start is ancient Rome, where men hit on women by, well, hitting them. Ha ha. Those wild and crazy Romans. Isn't this fascinating? From February 13th to the 15th, Romans celebrated the feast of Lupercalia. The men sacrificed a goat and a dog. Aren't you lovely? Then whipped women with the hides of animals they had just slain. I want you to know, to this very day, they are just as sick and satanic. The Roman romantics, quote, were drunk, they were naked, end quote, says Noel Lenski, historian at the University of Colorado Boulder. Young women would actually line up for the men to hit them. Lenski says, then believed this would make them fertile. You can just imagine what followed. And it goes on to say, Emperor Claudius II, another Satan worshiper, executed two men, both named Valentine, on February 14th of different years in the 3rd century AD. Their martyrdom was honored by the Catholic Church with the celebration of, quote, Saint Valentine's Day. You know, this just proves that social networking, Facebook, Twitter, and Google Plus are just sickening. Now, I played for you a little while back that clip from Captain America Winter Soldier where it describes the algorithm that Hydra is using to predict the future and who will be a threat. You know that is exactly what's going on, and Hydra is a metaphor for the Jesuits, just as Spectre is a metaphor for them in the James Bond series. I love these Facebook memories. Pulling out shit that you posted 6 years ago. Oh, by the way, when you write an email, especially in Facebook, or if you're posting something, if you post something and you delete it before you publish it, same thing with an email. The keystrokes are memorized, and even what you attempted to delete is saved. This is from Business Insider back in 2013, and as usual, I have all of my citations and sources in the notes. As Mark Twain observed, a lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth is finished putting its shoes on, and that was a long time before the web, which brings us to a meme that was propagating last week through social media. Its essence was an assertion that Facebook monitored and stored not only the stuff that its subscribers post on their Facebook pages, but even the stuff they started to type and then deleted. The source for the meme was an article by Jennifer Goldbeck in the venerable online magazine Slate. And you know what? If this is still available, I'll have this as the source, not some idiot writing about the source. Quote, the code in your browser that powers Facebook, end quote, it states, quote, still knows that you typed even if you decide not to publish it. It turns out that the things you explicitly choose not to share aren't entirely private. Facebook called these unposted thoughts, quote, self-censorship, end quote. Well, isn't that cute? So here's a story I posted from 6 years ago, before I was fully awake, and it comes from a cornerstone of papal propaganda, WorldNet Daily, run by Council for National Policy's Joseph Farah. The Council for National Policy is the most impotent secret society in history. It's actually a secret society, a gathering of the biggest frauds to the right of the political spectrum, and gives them their marching orders in how to be sickeningly ineffective. Essentially, it's Rupert Murdoch's school. How to keep good Christians and patriots pissed off about the wrong things. And that's exactly what WorldNet Daily and CNS News, run by devout Catholic L. Brent Bozell III. Now that may not trickle down to the individual writers. They're just doing going the direction that they're told to go in. But the choosing of which story to run, that falls into the laps of papal turds like Joseph Farah and his army of Catholic liars like Jerome Corsi. U.S. city considers surrender to, quote, green police, end quote. What would life in an American city look like if it required its residents to go green to combat climate change? Would it all... See, this is how you know when you're dealing with a rag. It absolutely slows your computer down. You click on anywhere in the rag in order to make sure your cursor is tracking on the rag so that you can use your scroll button. And after you click, immediately you are sent to a spam pop-up. There was a short period of time where browsers had pop-ups under control, and they're back. Thank you, Google Chrome, Internet Explorer, and all you other Luciferian scum. Cambridge, Massachusetts, home of Harvard University, may be giving the country a glimpse of the answer. Last May, the city officially adopted an order recognizing there is a climate emergency, but after nearly a year, officials discovered the city's carbon footprint was nonetheless growing worse. Cambridge Mayor-elect Denise Simmons, you can just guess what a hardcore communist she is. What's the passage in Isaiah 3:12? Lamenting, "Oh, my people, children oppress you and women rule over you." That's an awesome passage, by the way. 100 activists, concerned citizens, climate congress. You communist scum. The emergency. Blow it up. It's emergency. Disconnect your brain. You got an emergency. Blah, blah, blah. Leading by example comes with many suggestions. Dozens of incentives and subsidies for, quote, going green, which is euphemism for knocking good people back into the Stone Age on their standard of living, including posting street signs that advertise a residence's utility bills. Isn't that cute? Are you out of your mind? You fascist communist papal scum. Banning cars from shopping areas and even requiring restaurants and schools to observe, quote, meatless or vegan Mondays. Now, where do you think that comes from? They can't be too obvious and make it meatless or vegan Fridays, because then you'll know exactly who's speaking. It's the Whore of Babylon. Where exactly do we fit in the Jesuit world order? I am convinced that Freddie Tupper Saucy, is on it when he implies that they've been here all along. But we as human beings, when we are faced with a powerful conspiracy, we're tempted to assume that the power is limitless, that they can manipulate at will. And although they've had some sickening, shocking successes, perhaps there have been many pinnacles. The slaughter of Abraham Lincoln and the slaughter of, even more, broad daylight, Jack Kennedy, getting away with it to the point where no one even questions whether or not it was the Whore of Babylon, whether or not the Jesuits are behind those very high-profile assassination embarrassments for this country. When you can pull that off, you assume that an entity with that kind of power is all-powerful. But then they wouldn't have to manipulate you from the shadows, would they? A stickler for me, before I came to this point of view, to agree with my friend Walt Stickle and take up the Tupper flag, was the Constitution. And as you step back and look at it, you have to realize that, well, the Constitution in and of itself, although it does set limitations on the central government, it's not too hard to abuse the Constitution. That's certainly what we have today. No, it's the Bill of Rights that is the real stickler for the fascists and tyrants. And if you recall, the Bill of Rights are amendments. Now, I know that the Jesuit scum don't allow this to be taught anymore. You can become a constitutional lawyer and have never read the United States Constitution. Well, just ask Barack Hussein Obama. But the Constitution was not going to be ratified unless the new government clearly stipulated its own limitations and laid out what was accepted as God-given rights of freedom to the American people. Hence the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech in the First Amendment, freedom to bear arms against any form of tyranny in the Second Amendment. And the papist scum have been whittling that away ever since. What brought this out is, in my research, I came across a 2013 article in America Magazine, the National Catholic Review. Yes, very similar to the National Review, started by Skull and Bones papist William F. Buckley. The Jesuit scum call it America Magazine to lull you into the false sense of security that they really care about America, and is probably an inside joke amongst their boy-buggering circles. February 2013, repeal the Second Amendment. Plagued by rising levels of violent crime, in autumn of 76, the District of Columbia, ISIS and Mary, enacted one of the nation's toughest gun control laws. The law effectively banned handguns, automatic firearms, high-capacity semi-automatic weapons. Police officers were exempt, of course, because they are Praetorian class, from the provision of the law, as were guns registered before 76. And, of course, the Catholic communists go on to claim that this was an amazing success. And then it goes on to lament the Supreme Court decision in 2008 that struck it down, and they quote Scalia. Listen to how this is worded. In the court's majority opinion, Associate Justice Antonin Scalia wrote, "We are aware of the problem of handgun violence in the country, and we take seriously the concerns raised by many amici, in other words, friends of the court, But the enshrinement of constitutional rights necessarily takes certain policy choices off the table. The enshrinement of constitutional rights. Now, does that sound like a constitutional, quote, federalist of the Federalist Society? You understand that back in the day, a federalist was someone who wanted strong central government. Perhaps another word for fascist. We've grown in such an outrageously strong central government that now a so-called federalist is someone who's considered as wanting a federal sharing of powers, which gives papists like Scalia as much cover as fighting the commies did to high papal scum from Connecticut, Thomas Dodd, father of Christopher Dodd, the great. I'm sorry, Dodd was a great FBI Nazi hunter. Ronald Reagan, who reinstituted our legation to the sovereign city-state of the Vatican in 1984, which had been closed down when it was realized that by the American people, forced their puppets in Washington, demonically controlled, to sever relations with the Vatican, when it was found out that the Jesuits were behind the assassination of Lincoln. A hat plotched in the Surratt family home. Mother Mary Surratt, well, a perfect name for her, ran a boarding home. She was so vicious that she wouldn't allow anyone to apply to the boarding home unless they were Catholic. Of course, these are facts you're not allowed to know. It was just lone gunman John Wilkes Booth. The enshrinement of constitutional rights. So this papist scum, this Catholic communist, goes on to talk about how we just need to repeal the Second Amendment altogether, because it's just to, they've destroyed over the past couple of centuries the ability of a good American citizen to defend themselves with a military-grade firearm. Absolutely destroyed it. As a matter of fact, I didn't mean to have this come together like this, but Thomas J. Dodd, high Catholic scum, senator from Connecticut. Isn't it great how these papists can just own political power generation after generation? Old Tommy Dodd to little boy Chris Dodd, who hatched the housing bubble for us. Did you know that the great Nazi fighter from the Federal Bureau of Instigation, Thomas Dodd, created the 1968 Gun Control Act, brought it almost word for word from the Nazi 1938 Gun Control Act? Now, he was a big Nazi fighter, but hey, there were some things that he really admired about the Nazis. Had tried repeatedly to get it passed, and it wasn't until his Catholic traitor brethren scum and the Catholic Intelligence Agency slaughtered sitting Catholic President Jack Kennedy, and then sold another lone gunman lie, Lee Oswald, who was supposed to have bought his chunk of shit 6.5 millimeter Carcano bolt-action rifle, an Italian chunk of shit, I might say. Oh, he bought that in the mail. So we need to close that down. Yeah, it was the 1968 Gun Control Act, authored by Catholic communist scum Thomas Dodd of Connecticut. Lifted it almost word for word from the Nazi 1938 Gun Control Act. I'll have this in my notes too. Just beyond sickening. The only thing I can say is we need to race them to the finish. Wake up so many people that by the time they think they've got complete fascism in the bag, it's actually too late for them. And it's time to reap what they have sown.
Dudley! Get that son of a bitch! Hey, boy! Dudley, get him! That bastard.
Rape it, Murphy, you son of a bitch. Now it's over.
You know, speaking of disinformation and gun control, we've talked about it before. In fact, it's that scumbag website that masquerades as ABC. Now, when you see something outrageous, the very first thing you do is you look it up in an internet search engine. If it's really big, it'll be all over. It's interesting that one of my flying monkeys sent me a fake story from these scumbags, these traitors, at this ABC parody site, so-called parody. It's really all about disinformation, purposeful disinformation. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised to see people getting paychecks directly from the Catholic Intelligence Agency. One of my monkeys said that this story, something about King Messiah mandating Americans couldn't own more than 3 guns or something like that by executive order. Really outrageous. Designed to make you fly off the handle and with paranoia and anger. And then for you to be shown as a fool because you're deeply concerned about the gun control agenda. She said she found this story from Drudge, who in and of himself is controlled opposition. But I don't see that. Well, you know what? I was going to say I would have considered it a mistake, but now that I examine it, I wouldn't be surprised if Drudge put it up knowing that it was disinformation. I bring this up because there's another, the U-boob channels that are disinformation are legion. And in fact, as channels get popular, the very next thing that usually happens is they get co-opted. They get controlled, they get bribed, they get threatened. I've watched it happen. I watched it happen to that doofus Jeff C. Dabu7, that I call him Boo Boo 7 now. Another one that is a disinformation site. The cutely named Russian Vids. Now, you see a false flag shooting, and you rush out to find a confirmation. And then you have Russian Vids, gives you sometimes even good information, confirms for you that it is a false flag, and then hits you with this.
I already made a few videos on the supposed death of David Bowie, which is nothing more than a hoax. The man is alive and well. He's just going into retirement, just like many celebrities before him. They get sick and tired of being in the public eye, and this is their exit from the world stage. I just saw this video clip from The Simpsons that aired on the same day that David Bowie supposedly died, where a cat named Bowie is mentioned with 2 different colored eyes.
See that? David Bowie is alive. The Simpsons confirms it. And look, we have pictures of David Bowie in public after his death. Who the fuck cares? They probably teach you in classes by the CIA, run by the CIA on disinformation, the stupid shit that easily catches people. like a celebrity who's dead is still alive because here's their body double and it's really them. This video by this little turd who's sounds like he's literally sounds like he's sitting in his mommy's basement doing these 196,000 hits from YouBoob. Because the Luciferians funnel people his way, and he's able to mix up this diarrhea with the good information on the role of Freemasonry. I think he later goes on in this video to talk about Freemasonry and yes, that the Freemasons who are the foot soldiers, the Jesuits. Now this little turd will never say the word Jesuit, but that's how you hook people. Who the cares if David Bowie is still alive? How is this information that helps you in any way, shape, or form? It's not. He's also one of the retards putting out this Alex Jones is really Bill Hicks stupidity. That story has been floating around as a moronic distraction for years because that fat papist somehow looks like a dead comedian who talked about some truth topics. I've taught this to you before, my monkeys. The best way to cut through the bullshit is to show me the money. If what you're being told has no substance to it, then it's a distraction. Where's the beef?
It certainly is a big bun.
It's a very big bun.
Big fluffy bun.
It's a very big fluffy bun.
Where's the beef?
Some hamburger places give you a lot less beef on a lot of bun.
Where's the beef?
Yeah, this is just like that stupidity in Oregon with those Mormon Freemasons, the Bundys. Clearly there aren't enough operatives. They had to rely on those doofusi to stir up more trouble. But as I've told you repeatedly before, you get these idiots that use force to take over some ridiculous bureaucracy, some government building in the middle of nowhere that no one knows about or cares about. How does that help our cause against a tyrannical government that's treating us like an enemy? Doesn't, does it? In fact, it gives that very same government to become more tyrannical because it's now convinced that there are morons who will take over government buildings at gunpoint. In the same way that it's now convinced that a Christian constitutionalist can slaughter hundreds of people by bombing an FBI building. Well, I'm sorry, the government is convinced of that. The government did that job. But the government has managed to get many Americans convinced of it. And it's quite a sickening ploy that they use again and again. I'll bet you if I trolled the internet on Timothy McVeigh, or if I had a way of counting how often, right after the Boston bombing, Tax Day, Patriots Day, Timothy McVeigh, You're the next terror threat. This is fascinating. I'm not sure how I stumbled across this story. This is from NewJersey.com. Newark Archbishop's pricey retirement home spur splashes backlash as parishioners withhold donations. That's the spur for the home. It's an addition for this posh retirement home. This is a story. It's about a year old. Probably getting closer to 2 years. Every year without fail, Joe Ferry, good Italian Catholic, writes a $100 check to the Archdiocese of Newark for the Archbishop's annual appeal, a fundraising drive that benefits a variety of religious causes. Pause. I think it is with extreme irony that the most wealthy institution on the planet, sitting on piles of gold that it has stolen throughout the ages, the whore of Babylon, the Roman Catholic Church, continues to bilk its faithful of donations. Back to the article. This year, Ferry left the empty envelope on his pew at St. Thomas the Apostle Church in Bloomfield. He's done writing checks. If this is the only way I can be heard, so be it, said Ferry, 70. I'm disgusted. The Archdiocese is not going to get another penny out of me. 2 weeks after the New Jersey Star-Ledger disclosed that Archbishop John J. Myers is building a 3,000-square-foot addition on the expansive home where he will spend his retirement. It appears the work will cost the Archdiocese far more than $500,000 that was originally allotted for the construction. Isn't that fascinating? Yeah, religion pays, especially the religion of Satan.
You know what? That makes me mad.
Here's yet another story recommended by Flying Sergeant Janice. She's showing you up, boys, in more ways than one. Wanted in China, male teachers to make boys men. The history class began with a lesson on being manly. Lin Wei, 27, one of a handful of male 6th grade teachers at a primary school here, has made a habit of telling stories about warlords who threw witches into rivers and soldiers who outsmarted Japanese troops. Quote, men have special duties, end quote, he said. Quote, they have to be brave, protect women, and take responsibility for wrongdoing. Worried that a shortage of male teachers has produced a generation of timid, self-centered, and effeminate boys, Chinese educators are working to reinforce traditional gender roles and values in the classroom. Now, let me tell you what I told Flying Sergeant Janice when she sent me this. The papist scum who rule both the West and the East know exactly what's going on. I just gave you that quote from Isaiah. Woe to you, my people. Children oppress you and women rule over you. It's a curse. The Luciferian scum have been working for, well, I have to say hundreds of years on this agenda to subvert the divine roles, the common sense roles that the two genders play. Now, we all know this in our heart of hearts. Men and women are different. Men and women handle things differently. Women are not men and men are not women, or they're certainly not supposed to be. They're not supposed to act that way. They're not supposed to dress that way. Oh, and by the way, quick rabbit hole. This idea of a long-haired Jesus is only a recent one. The Jesuits dreamed it up out of the hippie movement. And really, there's some overlap in these agendas. They have done a phenomenal job of destroying masculinity in the West. Men have willingly added to it. You may think it's funny when Johnny spouts off incessantly about every single piece of crap that comes out of Hollywood, whether it's television or cinema, now has a hot woman who can kick your ass. Without exception. I'm some of Johnny's treadmill fare. I just popped in Mad Max Fury Road. The man, the one man who was a possible hero in the show, in the movie, is a coward constantly running from responsibility. The only one acting in a way that is selfless or heroic is a woman with chopped hair and a chopped arm. Oh, and by the way, it's rated R for, quote, disturbing images, and it is disturbing. It really, there's very little. The scales, what do you get out of it versus what does it take out of you? I'm still in it because I'm a sick fuck. And unless it's needless ways, well, just about everything in Hollywood is needless. graphic, gratuitous violence. I'll step away when it's clearly just too much and unnecessary. It's a shame Punisher Warzone really crossed over into that just needless B-grade horror movie graphic violence. Of course, it's Punisher. That's what you're kind of expect to see, but it's, I don't know. Violence. You want Punisher. What's Punisher about? Punisher is about justice, long overdue justice. So is justice bloody, vicious? Yeah, it will be. Oh, well, trust me, it will be. But we're still human beings. We're still civilized as we're meting out justice, as we're seeking justice. And I don't want to dwell on this rabbit hole. I want to get back to the story, but I very often have mused on how to mete out justice. For instance, all of these media sites, accepted and unaccepted, whose job it is to purposefully lie to you, misinform you, and distract you, knowingly and willingly, from the Caliphate News Network to Murdoch's faux news to these fraud, claimingly satire sites that they're nothing to do with satire, but just pure disinformation. And I muse on how I would handle it once I'm in power. And the first thing that comes to my mind that is proper justice is to take everybody involved and blind them, as it was their job to blind us. Honestly, it sounds brutal, but it's justice, isn't it? That's justice. I just can't fathom the mechanism for that. I can't fathom having a doctor blind someone. So, maybe we'll come up with jails that are completely run in darkness and the guards have night vision. I don't know. I just... and jail in and of itself is also a Luciferian institution that has little to do with justice as well. But, some things we'll compromise on, and other things we'll just wait for the Lord to mete out final justice. But back to this story, the Luciferian scum know that they have destroyed masculinity and manhood in the West. They know they've done it through the school system, that it's a woman's natural tendency to gravitate towards teaching, and particularly teaching young kids, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a maternal instinct. And there's nothing wrong with recognizing it as such. But smart people in China know that young men need male influence. So when you inundate children with the extremes of male experience, either to turn men into women or turn men into lust-driven animals, you divorce them from the discipline necessary to be a man, and therefore to be a threat to the power structure. A disciplined, resolute, responsible, moral man is the most dangerous weapon on the planet, period. And so these papal scum understand that. They understand that they have been riding the West, in particular, riding the United States, and as a result they have loaded the United States with their satanic advantages, technology and Nazi scientists and so forth. And so they have to even things out and allow Western competitors to catch up in small ways. And this is one of them. To understand the proper roles, proper gender roles, and to take steps to have a stronger male population in China so that when they dump us all together in a meat grinder, real Chinese men have to stand up against a technological advantage, and it increases the bloodshed on both sides. I just don't know what to make of what goes on in Russia. It absolutely is a manipulated and controlled country. But I don't know. Anatoly's nose tells me it is manipulated, it is controlled, but it is far less controlled there than it is in the West. And there's still a lot of antagonism and antipathy and fear that the papacy holds for the good Christian Russian people. So I get disturbed and concerned when I see stories about Putin meeting with Jorge, or this story meeting with Kissinger. It's from TASS, Novo Ogarevo. Russian President Vladimir Putin has held a meeting with former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger in his Novo Ogarevo residence outside Moscow, Russian Presidential Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov said on Wednesday. This fat old wraith is 92 years old. So clearly the hand of Satan is keeping this mummy alive. Kissinger, 92, former U.S. President's National Security Advisor. So what exactly is he doing now? And former chief of U.S. diplomacy initiated a policy of, quote, détente, end quote, in relations between the United States and the USSR. In 1973, he was awarded with the Nobel the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, okay, so Putin's handlers set this up. What are they going to do? What's he going to do? Say no? What are you going to do? Say he's not going to meet the Pope? Really, shit like this, I have to tell you, it seems similar to the gut feeling I had with Bergoglio meeting Patriarch Kirill, Moscow Patriarch. I guess he's the top man in Russian Orthodoxy. I'm not an expert. Meeting him over there in the People's Republic of Cuba. So there's always that common ground of communism between the Marxists in Russia and their communist parents in Rome. I just have the sense, and I can't prove it, that shit like this is bluster and propaganda. I just don't think the papists have the level of control in Russia that they want you to believe. I certainly don't think that when they stir shit by showing you Putin shaking this Luciferian mummy's hand, if there is, I don't even know if I want to grasp it too tightly, it might come off. That again, their meeting is not something that you immediately should be concerned over in regards to the well-being of Russia. I will say that Russian politicians are smooth and professional. I don't follow it as closely as I did when Ukraine was constantly in the news. But you'd see these Western puppet morons making these outrageous, clownish, the Russians eat babies, McCain and Hitlery, and all those clowns on direction from the Catholic-run State Department and the Catholic Intelligence Agency. Just really unprofessional. And the usual Russian response was calm and polite, and I don't know, maybe I'm generalizing because I don't swim in it every day, but that's just my take. And it's also my take that stories like this don't thoroughly dampen my hopes for resistance rising in Russia.
Why don't you make up your mind?
Well, I had not intended on banging out a complete episode so quickly, but I did want to clean out my inbox and get to a bunch of stories that were sitting in there that you monkeys had sent in to me. Now, this from someone I would consider a flying monkey cadet, Manuel from Belgium. And Manuel wrote that he heard my interview on Higher Side Chats, and he spent considerable time in Xavierus College, a Jesuit school that was the source of all his bad luck and bad things in life. They were cruel, totally bent on, quote, training, end quote, people to be the pillar of future generations. They openly told us, 10-year-olds and such, that we were either going to make it or be thrown away to live with the rest of our lives between the Untermenschen, the normal people, and the cattle. This is a great story. And by the way, Manny is already tracking that I'm going to share his story. But listen to me, monkeys. You're going to send me something, I'm going to talk about it. I will protect your identity, but I'm going to talk about it. Manny from Belgium says, I was the son of a chocolatier, someone who had to work very hard for every cent that he had. I didn't fit into the school of, quote, elite, quote, end quote, children. The elite sent all their sons to the schools in Belgium. There's schools like that in Belgium. People run for AGFA, Alcatel-Lucent, even the corporations that deliver the Minister of Finance in France and so on. It was a horror. But I've learned a lot about how the world worked. Since then, Jesuits are something I genuinely believe to be the vermin of our society. I don't mean to laugh, but I'm glad that it's out there. And unfortunately, Manny has learned the hard way. He's learned from personal experience and not from finding this out. He continues, the creeps did all caps, all they could to brainwash us to have collective punishments and even sexual abuse. The priests and Jesuits who did these crimes are all gone now. The worst of them committed, quote, suicide, end quote, in that building. I guess Manny thinks he was murdered. The third floor is haunted as well. Jesuits lived there, and we were not allowed to be on that floor. The paintings on the walls all over the school were made by famous artists, all in charcoal and protected. They depict the most creepy things. You really need to see these paintings, full of symbols and strange markings. This is really a fascinating letter. I had many talks with two of the more okay teachers there. One was senile, one was a little, quote, over the edge, end quote, and openly told stuff about their tactics and upbringing. They usually recruit, together with the child molester of the Broders van Liefde, Brotherhood of Charity, and weed out anyone with not the right attitude, family tree, and IQ. They constantly tested us, pointed someone out, and see who would rat them out as being guilty to not be punished themselves, and so on. Listen to this. All the people I knew in the class that made it all to university in that school were later on totally screwed up, quote, goons, end quote, of the system, great little machine cogs. Every one of them became a director, a CEO, or disappeared. Now, this email is fantastic. It's so fantastic you're wondering, okay, well, is this guy telling you the truth? Honestly, Anatoly's thinks, yeah, this guy's legit. I know of several who are not legit. As a quick aside, I've got one of them who is an absolute squirrel that includes me on emails that he sends to senators and sheriffs and big names in the community, which I think is his way of outing me. So back to Manny. I've seen many of the Jesuits being replaced to Africa for the Pope's missionary works in Congo, where we had to gather money for in March. One of them was an open pedophile, and when it became a bit too hot to handle, they shipped him off. And he gives the gentleman's name. I'll tell you, I should look this up. I'm sorry, he gives the brother's name. Anyway, I'm rambling. I want to tell you, the entire Kingdom of Belgium is run by Opus Dei. King Bedouin, and he's got that in quotes, and his wife Fabiola were Spanish, both Opus Dei. The current king, his nephew, is totally controlled by the industrialists. So Manny offered to send me information, and Manny did write me back with information and links. Bedouin was king for over 40 years. His wife, Spanish princess. In Belgium, there were some weird assassinations and cover-ups during his reign. He was a sort of religious figure here for most of the Flemish people, my part of Belgium, sadly enough, and they saw some sort of holy figure in him because of his super Catholic stands on topics. He looked like a very gray and good-doing guy. was popular, and so on. In his shadow was Queen Fabiola, his wife, who silently controlled him. It's a public secret here that males in the royal family aren't the brightest of the brightest. So they always put someone stronger next to them. Well, don't worry about that, brother. They do that here, too. Just ask the puppet that can't go into a 6th grade classroom without a couple of teleprompters. No exaggeration. And he's got listed the weird stuff during his reign: assassination of Julian Lahaut, communist leader in Belgium, shot dead. Oh, assassinating communists. That sounds like the Catholic Intelligence Agency with the crusaders that they have, who have no idea they're being played when they pull this shit. So they murder some poor communist idiot in one country, and in another country they're giving them billions of dollars of secrets. And apparently this Congo connection is pretty strong between Congo and Belgium. I guess this is the papal proxy to use in Africa. Assassination of Patrice Lumumba in Congo to replace him with a more pro-regime Mobutu, who got billions and billions from Belgium in exchange for silence about the genocide against his people and letting corrupt firms stealing resources. Since Leopold II, second king of Belgium, grandfather of Bedouin, Lumumba, democratic president of Congo, wanted to shed the Belgian rule and corrupt families from Congo and wanted reforms. He was captured by a Belgian army group and delivered to the rebels, who didn't kill him when they finished the job themselves eventually. Bedouin had to know about this, or his wife. He's got a link there. And of course the CIA did some handiwork to help, quote, defend, end quote, the U.S. The Benvennivel killed 28 people in supermarkets. I had to look that one up. That's the Brabant Killers, the Nivelis gang, thought to be responsible for a series of violent attacks that mainly occurred in the province of Brabant, Belgium, between 82 and 85. 28 people died, 40 were injured. Boy, that sounds like the handiwork of the Jesuits and Western intelligence. Fascinating. Manny, you're amazing. They found a scapegoat in a flamboyant rich boy named Patrick Hamers. Later found, quote, found hanged, end quote, in his cell. The guy was over 1 meter, 90 centimeters long, meaning I guess he's pretty tall, but apparently hung himself from a radiator in his cell. No one believes it. The real gangsters were at large, and to this day no one dares to speak about it. And he's got a Getty image. Here's Queen Fabiola kissing the hand of the Pope. In the 90s, Bedouin was no longer king of Belgium for 3 days because he refused to sign a legislation regarding abortion. Yeah, how typical. They eat children, but then they go out in public and pretend like they're taking a stand for righteousness. The mere fact that you have a member of royalty playing such a key role in law, it really is what they want to bring it back to. When Bedouin died, he ordered in his will the building of a monastery for the Sisters of the Carthusians. He's got some links on Opus Dei. Great work, Manny. Anatoly's Nose says Manny's legit, and Manny has lived it. I can't be sure without having some way to verify, but just the sense of what I've gotten, I'd say this is a fantastic report. I say Manny's graduated to full-fledged flying monkey and is no longer a cadet. I'm telling you, people are waking up. More and more are coming forward with information of what they know of the Jesuits, of the Whore of Babylon and her satanic special forces. Some, like Manny, are not just truth seekers, they've lived it. And they're finding the courage to come forth. They're finding that courage because resistance is rising.